Well, the rules for naming a type 2 compound are very similar to the ones for naming a type 1. But there's only one difference. You have to add a Roman numeral. And that's key. So remember, type 2 compounds are made from type 2 metals. And a type 2 metal is one that can have 2 or more possible charges. And it's this Roman numeral that we declare which charge it chooses to use. So let's see how to apply type 2 nomenclature rules using copper chloride, copper being a type 2 metal. After you kind of see the basics of how that's done, we're then going to come back and I'm going to show you how you can tell a type 2 metal from a type 1 metal. But for now, let's just look at how to name copper chloride. The first thing I do is name every binary non-acid as a type 1. And then I check the rules to see if indeed it is a type 1 compound. If it is, of course, then I just stop. But what if I name it as a type 1 and I decide, no, it's not a type 1? I then look at the rules to see if it's a type 2 compound. If I see that it is a type 2 compound, then I just add a Roman numeral and I stop. See, I don't start over, I just continue from where I left off. And just to look ahead, if I check and see that it's not a type 2, I still keep the type 1 name. I check to see if it's a type 3. If it is, I just add a prefix to the type 1 name, and then I'm done. And if I name it as a type 1 and I find out it's not a type 1 or type 2 or type 3, that's when I just bail and I move to another quadrant. Here we go. The first material is obviously copper chloride. But if I name the second one as a type 1, I would give it exactly the same name. Copper chloride. And hopefully this shows you the need for the Roman numeral, because just using the type 1 name, you can't tell one molecule from another, and they're indeed very different. So what we're going to do is we're going to add a Roman numeral in between the metal and non-metal, and they're capital Roman numerals, and they're always parentheses. Now I need to figure out which flavor of copper do I have? Well, that has to be determined, and this is probably the hardest part of doing nomenclature. And the way you figure out is based on the idea that you know the molecule is charge neutral. So you know copper chloride has to be a charge neutral compound. You know chlorine is -1, but we do not know the charge on the copper. Remember, it's type 2 metal, so there's 2 more choices that go here. So what can we do here? Well, it's given us the formula. We know the subscripts. If it gives you the formula, you know the subscripts. So we know the subscripts. We know the charge on one of them. And what else do we know? We know that the total positive plus the total negative has to sum to 0, because the molecule has to be charge neutral. So what's our total negative charge? 1 times -1 is -1. So if my total negative charge is -1, what must my positive charge be? My total positive charge must be +1. So now what is my copper going to be? In other words, 1 times what equals 1? Hey, I know, 1. And so it is this number in the block that goes there. So this would be called copper 1 chloride. Well, let's do the second one. We named the second one as copper chloride, so let's look at that formula and see what charge copper needs to be to make that molecule charge neutral. Copper chloride. The charge is still negative here. We don't know the charge on the copper. That's what we're looking for. So let's see if we can figure it out. 2 times minus 1 is minus 2. What minus 2 equals 0? That would be positive 2. And 1 times what equals 2? Well, that would have to be a 2. So this material would be called copper-2 chloride. And now we've differentiated the two. So the first compound is copper chloride, made from a copper with a charge of +1. And the second compound is copper chloride, made from copper with a charge of +2. Note a couple of things. There's no way to determine this but to do the math. You've got to go around the bend to do this math to figure that out. The second thing to note is, notice I did not throw away my type 1 name. I kept it and then did this around the bend thing to figure out what the charge on the metal is, and then I just wrote that in between the cation and anion as a capital Roman numeral. So remember, don't start over. If you see it's a type 2 compound, just patch up the type 1 name with a Roman numeral. Next video, we'll take a look at how to differentiate a type 1 metal from a type 2 metal. It's really not that hard.